I'm Spartacus Olsson.
And I'm Indy Neidell.
And I'm Anna Deinhard.
And this is yet another Out of the Foxholes Unscripted, where Indy and I sit here next to a fireplace, answering questions from you, asked by Anna on camera.
And, about the Second World War.
Mostly about the Second World War.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So I would do personal questions. If you have personal questions, I'm totally cool with that.
I don't know if it works in the Out of the Foxholes, though, because... Oh, you live in a foxhole.
Yes, I live in a foxhole. I don't know how I've done this whole channel this long and never mentioned that I live in a foxhole. Okay.
Yeah.
Now I'm shamed.
Okay. Here we go.
Here we go.
Hank Twitter. How much influence did the scandal of the forced
I think she's trying to say repatriation. I'm not.
I think so. I'm not sure.
It's probably going to turn out to be something else.
I don't know. Yeah.
Well,
it's going to be the scandal of the rapacious Frenchman or something.
Yeah, it could be. Yes.
It's the word they say it was. So I'm just going to skip the word. Thank you very much for
Repatriation.
that. Thank you.
Okay.
Of Soviet citizens at the end of World War II have on the 1951 Refugee Convention.
Now, I only talked about this a little bit and mostly during Potsdam and stuff, so I'll let you handle this. This is more your thing.
Yes. So I would say something and a little bit maybe, but not much, because of the way that the 1951 convention came about. We can actually see right where it started and what the motivation was, and that motivation lay far back in the past at this point, 1918. It was the refugee crisis after World War I that led to a long and tedious discussion about how they should provide more protection to refugees worldwide and find laws, international laws that would dictate the handling of refugees. Of course, once World War II was over, this was a much bigger crisis than what they had in 1918. And that was really the motivation. So it wasn't really only World War II. It was more, okay, World War II now made it clear that something needed to be done. Something needed to be done to protect millions and millions of people that were caught in camps or displaced and all of the things, terrible things that happened. And there's yet one more stone in this wall, and that is, of course, the Nakba, the tragedy, the refugee crisis of the Palestinians that begins in 1948, only 3 years before the Refugee Convention is drawn up. So, short answer, Soviet repatriation had a little bit to do with it, but not much, because it was the overall situation of millions and millions and millions of refugees that caused the need for an international framework for how to handle refugees.
Ritevik Upadhyay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think it's Ritevik Upadhyay or something like that.
Ritevik Upadhyay.
Yeah.
Better. Why did the fascists and communists hate each other? Okay, I really don't know much about them, but judging from the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, both support the aggressive takeover of countries if it benefits them, and in communism, all land belongs to the government, and both are dictatorships. So naturally, they should work together. But that doesn't happen as Hitler invades the USSR and calls it a war of extermination and battle of ideologies.
We're currently doing the Rise of Hitler series, which follows Germany society month by month, starting January 1930 on the World War II on this channel. And every single month, you get to really see the conflict between the Nazis and the communists, really stark out. Like you see the hatred and stuff. So you can do some explaining and all kibitz and stuff, but you really want to see it in action, you should watch that series.
Okay, so this is an oft-debated question. Why? Because some people say they're the same,
They're not the
and
same.
they're not the same at all. They are very much the opposite kinds of ideologies. So, and they might, however, share some methods. Yes, they are dictatorial, authoritarian, and prone to use violence in order to forward their ideological goals. They are also expansionist, the internationalist idea that is inherent to communism, and of course the idea of Lebensraum and living space for the German race is inherent to the Nazi movement. But fundamentally they are complete opposites. So if you look at it from a social policy level, the communists are proponents of a revolutionary absolute equality enforced by violence. That
So
is to say,
non-hierarchical society.
no
rigid
classes,
hierarchies.
everybody's equal,
Religion.
nothing, and that's the idea. No religion, secular, all of that. While as the Nazis are the complete opposite.
Specifically
they are
hierarchical.
patriarchal. They are hierarchical in their view of things. The questionnaire also, or the questioner also asked or mentioned nation control over land. While that is inherently communist, it is absolutely not part of Nazism, contrary to what people believe, because there's this great misunderstanding about Nazi economics based on the total war movement that began in February 1943.
Which has nothing to do with the peacetime.
It has nothing
economy.
to do with actual Nazi policy. That's an extreme measure to put the German state on an absolute war footing and invest, lo and behold, 60% of state income into the war, which is practically unheard of in any, well, maybe the 30 years war in Sweden, and that bankrupted the country, but otherwise there are very few who've managed to do that. So the German Nazi economy was not based on nationalization of industry or state
control
of anything. They actually forward something called corporatism, where they promote industrial leaders, bankers, and so on to become cartels and control the economy.
But to work within the framework of the Nazi belief system and stuff. Because it saves you a lot of time and money if you don't have to have your hands on the full economy.
Exactly.
But you're still getting the rewards from the economy.
So there's no central planning, there's no state control of industry and everything like that, while as the communists are completely centrally planned, complete state control of all of that. So you got two very, very opposite ideologies here. More than anything, though, from the Soviet viewpoint, from the communist viewpoint, Nazis and extreme right is the spearhead of the capitalist bourgeoisie in their viewpoint. So they need to be destroyed because this is the army they fear that the capitalists will use to destroy them. From the Nazis' viewpoint, the Bolsheviks and the Soviets are a Jewish conspiracy in order to tear Germany apart between the capitalist countries, US, Great Britain, and so on, the imperialist countries, as they call it, and they see it, and then this, which is completely wrong, but what they say is a Jewish created and controlled ideology, Bolshevism.
But it wasn't for the whole world. It was really specifically anti-German, was what they said. There was like, oh, they want to take over the world, and that's bad. No, they were they are anti-German, and we can't have that.
Like, well, they did believe in a world domination conspiracy, but that wasn't really. But that didn't bother them so much.
They didn't think about the rest of the world that much in that way.
No, they didn't. It was the anti-German conspiracy that was there. So here you have it. You got two fundamentally opposed ideologies with conflicting interests regarding land. The whole racial issue is as well is that the German race, which doesn't exist, is supposed to take control and domination of all of Europe. In order to do that, they need to exterminate the Jewish race, and they need to subjugate and enslave and decimate the Slavic race. And just to be clear, these are not racists, but that's another issue. These are Nazi beliefs that are very deeply inherent to the ideology. And from the Russian Bolshevists' viewpoint, Western Europe needs to be subjugated to socialism, and therefore they want to go as far west as it can. Stalin personally wanted to recreate the borders of the Russian Empire as a Bolshevist empire, and of course that means that they were basically jonesing for the same land. That was
It's Stalin's fault they didn't get it in the first place, man. Yeah. Kind of, the battle. Well, we're not getting into the Battle of Warsaw. That's another story.
Okay.
Yep. Okay.
But that, I think, answers it.
That's a good answer.
Alan Christopher Köif, was the German invasion of the Soviet Union a preemptive strike against a potential Soviet invasion in July 1941?
To answer this, there's a couple of ways you have to answer this, because you have to answer it in a way that it's impenetrable to conspiracy theorists, but you can do that second. First, you just have to answer it on the practical level. Hitler was already writing in the 1920s that literally his magnum opus was to the destruction of the Soviet Union and this, what he called the Judeo-communist conspiracy, blah, 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 whatever you want to call it. And as you see, in the Rise of Hitler series on this channel and stuff, month after month in his speeches, he talks about expanding to the east. That's where the plan was, to expand to the east. Already just after the fall of France, in July 1940, come the first plans, the first outlines for Operation Barbarossa. Those are made clearer and clearer throughout the fall. The Paulus War Games in December 1940 are to see how feasible things will actually work in the field. This was something that went on for a long, long time. And of course, they have to wait until the end of the spring muds, which means that the Barbarossa in no case could begin before mid-June-ish, 1941. So people that say that, the invasions of Greece and Yugoslavia, that made them have to wait, they didn't have to wait. This was all planned in concert. There's no way, if Greece and Yugoslavia were not invaded in the first place, they still could not have attacked the Soviet Union before.
They did move the invasion, though, 1 week.
Yeah, 1 week. Okay, 1 week. Now, in order to but people are still saying, oh yeah, but Stalin is thinking, now there's some, yeah, okay. Could he? Well, look at what has happened in Europe in the 18 months before 1941. For the Soviet Union, they had the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, and they got some land, right? Great. And then they had a war with Finland, little Finland with its 5 million people. And after 4 months, they had lost hundreds of thousands of soldiers, had barely achieved their first goals. The muds were about to start. Taking the country would have been a slog. And so, they got sort of what they wanted. They won, but they didn't win the way they were supposed to win. That's what had happened to the Soviets. It had showed that their army was a complete paper tiger, and the purges had destroyed a large amount of its offensive capability. The lack of training, the lack of soldiers, the lack of equipment, the lack of terrain-specific equipment. What had the German army done? Well, they had taken their part of Poland, and then Denmark, and Norway, and Belgium, and Holland, and Luxembourg, and France, which was one of the most powerful armies and countries in the world. 6 weeks? 6 weeks it took to defeat France. They had also just recently taken 6 days it took to take Yugoslavia and Greece. Who would attack that army? Who is going to go, we had a real hard time with the Finns a year ago, and since then, these guys, they've taken all of these countries with pretty much ease. Let's attack that country. Stalin was many, many things, but Stalin was not stupid. Okay? And even had there been a preemptive, to do what? To destroy the German army, to destroy its offensive capability? That's not possible. Stalin knew it wasn't possible.
And we don't really but this is not just speculation, because we know from the Kremlin archives what was going on in the head of Stalin and Rotmistrov and all of the other guys who were involved in the planning of the Russian, and Zhukov, and the guys who were actually working on the defenses that they were building up. They were not planning any attack, at least not in the near future, and that is, I'm talking about years now. They were planning to beef up their defenses, and Stalin had convinced himself and some of his entourage, not all, but nobody dared contradict him, but he had convinced them and himself that Hitler would stay true for another couple of years.
And he was actually helping that. They were sending more supplies, the months that they sent the most under the Molotov-Ribbentrop, like oil and things, they were sending more supplies the last couple of months leading up to the summer of 1941, as Stalin began occasionally hearing, well, the Germans have 36 divisions to push the oil fields in Romania. What possible reason would you need 36 divisions in the oil?
And the reason goes back why they were doing this was they were trying to placate the Germans and keep them easy and feeling good about the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact and the Soviet-German friendship agreement that followed on top of that only 2 months after the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. So there they are, trying to give the Germans the feeling, you don't need to attack us yet, although we know you will attack us eventually.
We know you hate us. We know you hate us.
Yeah, only for one reason, and that goes back to what Indy said. They had a paper tiger of an army, and they needed, we saw that then in end of June 1941, they knew that they stood no chance against the Germans at this point. They knew that overall,
whether on offense or defense,
doesn't matter. So they needed to build up the defenses. And because they weren't built up, well, there was only one choice. String Hitler along.
Yeah.
Didn't work. Hitler came. Foreseeably, it failed because invading Russia is
It's harder than you think.
Yeah.
No, it really is. Just ask Napoleon.
Yes.
It's really hard, especially once you get colder and colder. All right.
Yeah.
That's your answer.
Paul Dawson. Why were the Nazis able to build a more effective cult of personality around Hitler than the Italian fascists around Mussolini? Is this true?
Well, okay. Cult of personality, how long, how severe? Mussolini had a huge cult of personality around him from the early
21
20s
years.
until things really started going south. And then everybody turned on because, we don't like this guy. No, well, it was a little more complicated than that. But that's a pretty serious cult of personality.
Hitler lasted 12 years and Mussolini lasted 20 years. So there's your...
Oh, and we're doing The Last Rise of Hitler, one that's coming out soon, or maybe it's out already. Mussolini actually sends Hitler a signed portrait, and Hitler responds with this fawning, like, you are the best. Oh my God, I can't believe you thought of me. I mean, come on.
I did my best to read that in the most sycophantic way you could.
It's hard to not read it in a sycophantic way, because you're like, gee, Adolf, guess you like this guy.
You got a little bit of a man
He wanted to be
crush.
this guy until he didn't want to be this guy. There was a man crush going on for 4 or 5 years. On that
The funny
side.
thing is that Mussolini did not respect Hitler much, at least not in the beginning.
No.
Eventually, Hitler won Mussolini over, so to say, with the pure might of the Wehrmacht.
Yeah.
But for most of the time, Mussolini thought that Hitler was just a kind of upstart corporal. He was not very fond of it.
But the cult of personality, do you mean the breadth of it, the intensity of it, the length of it? I wouldn't say that Hitler had more of a cult of personality than Mussolini had. I wouldn't say the opposite either, though. No.
The Hitler one was interesting in as much as that it created this... Mussolini was much more involved in the actual politics of Italy than Hitler was in the day-to-day politics of Germany. Yeah. And this created this whole weird thing of working towards the Führer, because Mussolini was actually a fairly competent dictator. He gathered the forces, he had them under control and all of that.
He shouldn't have sent people outside of the country to attack other people.
But he still had them under control.
Yeah.
And Hitler, he had them under control with a completely different method, because he ruled by division. So he pitted all of his different princes and subordinates against each other.
It worked in the army too. It worked with the different leaders and the different...
And they were all working towards the Führer. So he set the goal, and then he looked at it and he said, okay, well, I know that Himmler and Canaris don't get along very well.
Yeah,
so let's give them the same brief and see who does it better.
Yeah, it was really ruled by division, but it worked with OKH and OKV.
But would you say that it was a better love story than Twilight?
Oh, okay. Wait. Let's be clear. Okay. The first Twilight book, I would not. But once you start getting the wolves in, then you lose me.
Yeah.
When it was just when it's just you know what I mean. When it's just the first,
I get you. Yeah, I get you.
Because that was come on. I remember you were like a kid. I remember when you were trying to explain to Astrid this party, like, this is really good, and they're like, okay, and you're like, Indy read it. I'm like, I did. I read the first one. I wanted to see what it was like.
The first one was great.
First one was really good.
Yeah, it is.
So, but they lose me the second one. They lost me the second one.
Yeah, the second one wasn't good.
Yeah. So, but it was. Well, you weren't actually bound by blood you were not existentially tied to either Hitler or Mussolini much as you thought you were. But so there is a difference there. There's a slight difference there.
Okay, slight.
Yeah, and but yeah.
Both kind of buffoons, though.
Oh, easily buffoons.
Yeah.
So vampires were cooler.
So much cooler.
So much cooler.
And that is it for today. That was pretty cool.
That was pretty cool. I enjoy doing these. It keeps you on your toes.
It does.
When she's asking the question, you have to not just think of the answer. You have to think of how you're organizing it, the way you're going to present it. Yeah. Otherwise, it's just a meandering babble of baloney.
It's trickier than having a teleprompter.
It is trickier than having a teleprompter. It's also warmer because of the fire here. Okay, now if you definitely want to get your question answered, what level is it? You can join the Time Ghost Army?
Any officer level.
Any officer level, we owe you an answer to a question, and we will answer that question. And otherwise, do not forget to subscribe. And of course, we'll see you next time on Every Time here on Out of the Foxholes on World War II and Excelsior!